The Instagram photos that initially documented Lauren Hayes' fairy tale romance with Sheikh Khalid Al Nasser remain online like digital ghosts of a vanished reality. Opulent images showing a radiant 29-year-old California fashion stylist draped in couture gowns against backdrops of private jets, 7-star hotels, and Arabian desert sunsets. The final public post before her disappearance from social media for 78 days showed her hand bearing a 20-carat diamond engagement ring alongside the caption, "When a girl from LA meets her prince, dreams really do come true. Number blessed by love, number royal wedding, number Dubai." The stark contrast between these carefully curated images of apparent perfection and the desperate voice messages she would later secretly send to her best friend Evelyn Carter from within the gilded walls of Al Nasser's palace compound represents perhaps the most chilling example of how public perception and private reality can diverge when wealth, power, and cultural differences create dangerous vulnerability masked by the trappings of extreme luxury and apparent privilege. The investigation that would eventually lead to international diplomatic negotiations, clandestine extraction planning, and Lauren's eventual escape from Dubai began not with official reports, but through persistent concern from Evelyn Carter, whose increasingly desperate attempts to contact her friend, following weeks of uncharacteristic communication, silence eventually connected her with private security consultant Michael Devlin, whose specialized experience with cases involving Western women in restrictive Middle Eastern environments would prove crucial in understanding the complex legal, cultural, and security challenges preventing Lauren from simply walking away from the situation she had gradually realized was not the exclusive romantic partnership she had believed, but rather incorporation into what she would later describe as a collection of women maintained like luxury possessions, each kept in her own gilded cage within the compound walls. The detailed account that Lauren Hayes provided following her return to the United States revealed sophisticated manipulation, extending far beyond simple deception, with Sheikh Khalid having constructed elaborate separate narratives for each woman in his collection, creating deliberate schedules, ensuring they rarely encountered one another while maintaining distinct staff assigned to each villa within the compound, an arrangement she discovered only gradually after her initially jubilant arrival at what she had believed would be her exclusive marital home, following a wedding ceremony that international legal experts would later determine held no legitimate standing under either UAE or American law. Despite its lavish execution and apparent documentation through what proved to be ceremonial, rather than legally registered paperwork designed specifically to create illusion of marriage without establishing actual legal rights that legitimate spouse status would have provided. The psychological manipulation that enabled Sheikh Khalid to maintain multiple simultaneous relationships with women who believed themselves unique in his life demonstrated sophisticated understanding of isolation tactics, exploiting cultural disorientation experienced by Western women in unfamiliar environments where language barriers, legal system differences, and strict behavioral expectations created fundamental vulnerability, further exacerbated by carefully structured dependency through passport confiscation characterized as standard security procedure, communication, limitations justified through privacy concerns, and financial control established by replacing independent access with staff-mediated, unlimited accounts that, while superficially generous, actually required approval for all expenditures and created comprehensive monitoring of all activities through purchase tracking that further reinforced the control system disguised as privileged lifestyle. The cultural context that facilitated Lauren's entrapment extended beyond simple East-West differences to encompass specific elite environments, where extreme wealth creates parallel systems operating under different rules than ordinary society, with Sheikh Khalid's status providing insulation from normal legal scrutiny through combination of political connections, strategic charitable contributions, establishing social goodwill, and carefully maintained public image as enlightened businessman bridging Western and Middle Eastern worlds through economic and cultural initiatives that generated positive media coverage, obscuring private behaviors that remained hidden behind compound walls, protected by extensive security systems and staff loyalty ensured through exceptional compensation contingent upon absolute discretion regarding internal household matters, characterized as private family affairs, rather than potential criminal confinement that Lauren's eventual testimony would describe. The relationship timeline, reconstructed through combination of social media documentation, witness testimony, and Lauren's eventual detailed account, established rapid progression from initial meeting at Dubai Fashion Week, where she had been styling American celebrities, through whirlwind courtship phase, featuring international travel via private jet, lavish gifts establishing both financial power and apparent devotion, and strategic introduction to carefully selected family members and business associates who reinforce the narrative of exclusive relationship leading toward legitimate marriage rather than incorporation into existing household structure that already contained multiple women maintained in similar circumstances, but kept carefully separated through elaborate scheduling and physical layout of the sprawling palace compound, where separate villas connected to central facilities through discrete pathways designed to minimize unplanned encounters between residents, who were each led to believe in their unique status. The documentation that enabled Lauren's eventual extraction required extensive international cooperation with American consular officials, private security contractors, and UAE contacts sympathetic to women's rights, working through complex legal terrain where jurisdictional questions, diplomatic considerations, and practical security challenges created multi-layered obstacles to straightforward intervention. The critical breakthrough came through Lauren's connection with Amira, Moroccan woman occupying another villa within the compound, whose longer residence had provided greater understanding of actual household structure and operational patterns, enabling development of communication strategies, exploiting security gaps created through staff rotation schedules and technological vulnerabilities in otherwise comprehensive monitoring systems. Their collaboration established evidence documentation through hidden recordings, systematic mapping of compound security, and identification of potential exit pathways that collectively created foundation for extraction planning that would ultimately succeed despite elaborate precautions. Sheikh Khalid had established specifically to prevent independent movement of women he considered permanent additions to his collection, regardless of their own intentions or desires. The financial investigation that followed Lauren's return to the United States revealed sophisticated mechanisms designed specifically to create appearance of generosity while establishing comprehensive control, with forensic accounting discovering elaborate shell company structures, conditional asset transfers appearing as gifts but containing hidden recapture provisions, and strategic use of jurisdictional differences to prevent straightforward asset division or support claims despite ceremonial marriage having been presented publicly as legitimate union. This financial architecture represented deliberate exploitation of legal gray areas spanning multiple countries, utilizing specialized expertise specifically developed to shield wealthy individuals from financial responsibility toward partners, while maintaining public narratives about generous provision and lavish lifestyle that superficial examination would interpret as privileged position rather than recognizing the comprehensive dependency and control. These arrangements actually established through systematic elimination of independent resources or legal standing that might have facilitated straightforward exit when Lauren discovered the actual circumstances of what she had entered, believing to be exclusive marriage, but gradually recognized as incorporating her into pre-existing collection of women, maintained through similar patterns of deception, isolation, and controlled luxury, characterizing all relationships Sheikh Khalid established with women across multiple countries and cultural backgrounds. The professional trajectory that brought Lauren Hayes into Sheikh Khalid Al Nasser's orbit reflected both exceptional talent and strategic positioning within luxury fashion circles, with her California upbringing in middle-class surroundings, providing little indication of the international career she would develop through combination of aesthetic instinct, relentless networking, and sophisticated understanding of social media's power to establish professional credibility in image-conscious industries. Her graduation from Los Angeles Fashion Institute had led to entry-level styling assistant positions before strategic career moves, positioning her adjacent to celebrity circles, where her distinctive aesthetic blending edgy California sensibility with global luxury references gradually established client base spanning entertainment, business, and social media influencer domains. This professional development created foundation for international assignments, including Dubai Fashion Week invitation, that placed her in proximity to ultra-wealthy circles, normally inaccessible, without either inherited position, strategic introduction through established connections spanning divergent social worlds. The initial meeting between Lauren and Sheikh Khalid occurred at exclusive VIP reception, following runway presentation featuring several clients she had styled, with witness accounts describing calculated approach disguised as spontaneous encounter, orchestrated through advanced research into attendees and specific positioning, enabling seemingly casual introduction that Lauren initially interpreted as fortunate social serendipity, rather than recognizing deliberate targeting based on predetermined criteria that investigation would later establish, followed consistent pattern in Sheikh Khalid's selection process, identifying attractive Western women with sufficient public profile to enhance his image while lacking powerful family connections or independent wealth that might complicate control establishment. The conversation, demonstrating his familiar knowledge of her professional background, registered as flattering research indicating genuine interest rather than warning sign, revealing systematic identification and information gathering, preceding approach that characterized his established methodology for identifying potential additions to his collection of women. The courtship phase demonstrated sophisticated understanding of psychological manipulation through combination of intermittent reinforcement, apparent vulnerability selectively revealed to create emotional intimacy, and overwhelming sensory experiences, establishing powerful association between Sheikh Khalid's presence and exceptional emotional states difficult to replicate in ordinary relationships, lacking access to extreme luxury experiences that wealth difference enabled. The calculated progression began with seemingly spontaneous invitation to small dinner that actually featured elaborate private dining room, personal chef preparation, and rare vintage wines, establishing both exceptional resources and apparent desire to impress, without explicit financial discussion that might have seemed transactional rather than romantic. This initial experience established pattern where each interaction featured escalating luxury components while maintaining conversation focused on emotional connection, personal histories, and apparent mutual recognition that both characterized as unique compared to previous relationships, creating foundation for exceptional romance narrative that Lauren understood as exclusive connection rather than recognizing established methodology applied systematically across multiple relationships. The acceleration from initial meeting to marriage proposal spanned just 63 days, with Sheikh Khalid utilizing strategic international travel to create shared experiences across multiple exclusive environments, while maintaining careful separation from his existing household arrangements through explanation that cultural considerations and business responsibilities required maintaining separate residences during engagement period. This constructed narrative exploited Lauren's limited understanding of Emirati cultural practices, presenting traditional elements when they served control establishment, while emphasizing his supposedly progressive attitudes in areas where traditional expectations might have created resistance to rapid relationship progression. The proposal itself featured elaborately staged private beach dinner in Maldives, following days luxury activities, with professional photography team disguised as resort staff, capturing images that would feature prominently in subsequent social media announcements that generated professional visibility, interpreting relationship through Western romantic narrative completely disconnected from actual circumstances Lauren would discover following wedding ceremony and subsequent relocation to Dubai Palace compound. The preparation period between engagement and wedding ceremony featured deliberate acceleration, preventing detailed consideration of legal implications, practical life adjustments, or thorough investigation of Sheikh Khalid's background beyond carefully curated public information and strategic introductions to selected associates who reinforced his presented narrative. The compressed timeline, justified through combination of business scheduling requirements and cultural preferences, effectively prevented comprehensive due diligence, while creating excitement that close friends later described as unlike Lauren's typically methodical approach to significant decisions, with several noting concerns about uncharacteristic impulsivity that they hesitated to express directly, given her evident happiness and the apparent extraordinary opportunity the relationship represented. This accelerated timeline represented established methodology in Sheikh Khalid's approach with investigation, eventually identifying nearly identical patterns in previous relationships, where rapid progression from meeting to ceremonial marriage prevented thorough consideration while creating emotional momentum, overriding potential caution that more extended timeline might have allowed. The wedding ceremony itself represented masterpiece of cultural misdirection, combining selective traditional Emirati elements with Western components in hybrid celebration that appeared to honor both backgrounds while actually creating elaborate simulation of legal marriage without establishing actual matrimonial rights under either jurisdiction. The documentation provided to Lauren featured ornate certificates in multiple languages that investigation would later determine held ceremonial rather than legal standing, with strategic absence of official registration procedures that would have required additional verification inappropriate given Sheikh Khalid's existing marital arrangements. The ceremonial witnesses included carefully selected participants without actual legal standing to verify legitimate marriage formation, while elaborate celebration aspects, including prominently displayed luxury elements, created powerful experiential distraction from procedural irregularities that legal expert would have immediately identified as failing to establish binding matrimonial status despite apparent formality and expense, suggesting legitimate union formation. The relocation process to Dubai featured calculated isolation establishment disguised as privileged transition, with private jet transportation directly to palace compound rather than through normal immigration channels, eliminating passport control documentation that might have established official entry record. The passport confiscation, characterized as security procedure, represented first direct control mechanism, though presented with sufficient cultural context, referencing protection of valuable documents. That initial surrender seemed reasonable accommodation rather than recognized as critical rights limitation, establishing fundamental mobility restriction. The compound introduction, presented as exclusive private tour, highlighted luxury elements including personal villa, dedicated staff, and extensive amenities, while carefully avoiding areas where other women resided through strategic scheduling, ensuring no unexpected encounters during initial orientation that presented arrangement as exclusive marital home rather than a component within larger residential complex housing. Multiple women in similar circumstances, but maintained with careful separation through both physical design elements and comprehensive scheduling systems, preventing unplanned interactions. The communication limitations, initially introduced through suggestions about local technological limitations, privacy considerations, and cybersecurity concerns, represented sophisticated isolation methodology with graduated restrictions, beginning with reasonable-seeming preferences about limited social media posting related to private residential spaces, before progressing to more comprehensive monitoring justified through cultural context, and security requirements appropriate to wealthy household. The staff role in communication management expanded gradually from logistical assistance to comprehensive mediation, with direct access to outside contacts increasingly channeled through household communication systems, rather than personal devices that were systematically separated from Lauren's possession through sequential obstacles, including charging incompatibilities, service access limitations, and eventually direct restriction, characterized as appropriate to household protocol that she gradually recognized as control mechanism rather than cultural accommodation as initially presented and temporarily accepted. The first indications that the residential arrangement involved other women emerged through subtle environmental cues rather than direct disclosure, with Lauren noting inconsistencies in staff explanations regarding certain compound areas, unexpected schedule adjustments without clear justification, and eventually brief glimpse of another Western woman quickly redirected by staff intervention that household manager explained as visiting family member but prompted initial suspicion, leading to more deliberate observation efforts. The critical connection with Amira occurred through unplanned encounter during rare scheduling overlap, approximately 3 weeks following Lauren's arrival, with momentary private conversation establishing mutual recognition of deliberately constrained circumstances that subsequent secret communications would develop into alliance, providing both emotional support and practical collaboration, essential to eventual evidence, documentation, and extraction planning that neither could have accomplished individually, given the comprehensive monitoring and isolation systems established specifically to prevent both external communication and internal alliance formation among women maintained within the compound. The gradual discovery of actual household structure occurred through combination of deliberate investigation and accidental discoveries, as Lauren developed greater understanding of both physical compound layout and operational patterns governing daily activities. The critical breakthrough in connecting with Amira came through identification of brief surveillance gap during staff shift changes that created approximately 12-minute window when certain connecting pathways between villas lacked direct monitoring, enabling clandestine meetings that established foundation for information exchange, revealing comprehensive understanding of household operations that Amira had developed during 3 years of residence. Her detailed knowledge identified 4 additional women maintained in similar circumstances: Russian former model Natasha, 31, British University graduate Rebecca, 26, Lebanese singer Farah, 30, and American former advertising executive Sarah, 33, each believing herself in unique relationship with Sheikh Khalid through customized narratives tailored to individual backgrounds, but following identical control patterns, including restricted movement, monitored communications, and financial dependency, despite apparent luxury that superficially disguised fundamental confinement reality. The security infrastructure that maintained separation and control combined sophisticated technological systems with human surveillance, featuring comprehensive camera coverage throughout common areas, motion sensors at transition points between compound sections, electronic access limitations restricting movement between zones, and staff reporting structures, ensuring continuous awareness of all residents' locations and activities. The physical design elements reinforced separation through layout, specifically developed to create discrete living zones connected to central facilities through pathways scheduled for use according to elaborate rotation system, preventing unplanned encounters. With architectural features, including screened corridors, multiple access routes to shared facilities, and strategic landscaping, creating visual barriers between different compound sections. This integrated approach reflected deliberate development, specifically targeting control maintenance while preserving illusion of exclusive relationship for each woman through elimination of evidence, contradicting individual narratives that Sheikh Khalid maintained through separate presentations and interaction styles, tailored to each relationship, but following consistent pattern of apparent exclusivity contradicted by actual household structure. The documentation effort that Lauren and Amira developed required exceptional creativity in overcoming surveillance systems, specifically designed to prevent both evidence collection and unauthorized communication. Their methodical approach included creating hidden recording devices from repurposed electronic components, developing innocuous-appearing methods for mapping compound security features through activities disguised as exercise or meditation practices, establishing timeline documentation by creating coded journal entries, appearing as fashion notes or menu planning, and identifying surveillance blind spots, permitting private conversations beyond monitoring systems designed to prevent precisely such alliance formation between women who were intended to remain isolated from one another despite physical proximity within sprawling compound, where Sheikh Khalid maintained each relationship through customized narrative, presenting arrangement as unique rather than component within established collection, spanning multiple relationships. Maintained through identical control methodologies, despite superficial customization based on individual background, interests, and vulnerability factors identified during selection and courtship phases. The psychological control mechanisms extended beyond physical limitations to include sophisticated emotional manipulation, tailored to each woman's specific vulnerability factors, with Sheikh Khalid demonstrating remarkable ability to maintain distinct interaction styles across multiple relationships, presenting as intellectual companion to academically inclined Rebecca, spiritual partner to Farah, whose religious background received careful acknowledgement, business mentor to achievement-oriented Sarah, artistic patron to Natasha's creative aspirations, and for Lauren, fashion industry connector, whose influence could further professional aspirations through introductions and opportunities, reflecting her career focus. This customized approach created powerful investment in believing relationship, sincerity despite emerging evidence, contradicting exclusive partnership narrative, with each woman having received narrative specifically designed to align with personal values, aspirations, and self-concept in ways that created significant psychological barrier to recognizing manipulation, even as physical evidence increasingly revealed actual circumstances, contradicting presented relationship framework. The financial control structure established comprehensive dependency while maintaining illusion of exceptional generosity, with each woman receiving apparently unlimited accounts for personal expenses that actually required staff approval for all transactions, while creating detailed monitoring of all purchases, activities, and movements outside compound during limited approved excursions. The apparently generous provision of luxury goods, including designer clothing, jewelry, and personal items, actually functioned as sophisticated monitoring system, documenting preferences, interests, and activities through purchasing patterns, with information feeding into relationship management approach, allowing Sheikh Khalid to maintain impression of attentive partner despite limited actual time investment divided among multiple women whose schedules were carefully managed, prevent awareness of parallel relationships maintained through identical methodologies, customized with superficial individualization, preserving illusion of unique connection despite systematic application of established control techniques. The critical challenge in planning potential exit involved multiple obstacles beyond physical security systems, with legal vulnerabilities creating particular concern given unclear immigration status, resulting from unconventional arrival outside normal channels, absence of passport or independent identification documentation, uncertain legal standing regarding ceremonial marriage, lacking official registration, and jurisdictional complexity spanning American citizenship, UAE residence, without clear legal status, and potential criminal implications based on strict local moral codes regarding unmarried cohabitation that created potential legal jeopardy, completely disconnected from Western expectations regarding relationship dissolution rights, personal autonomy. These legal complications represented deliberate exploitation of jurisdictional differences, specifically creating vulnerability that reinforced physical control mechanisms through fear regarding potential consequences of attempted departure, without appropriate legal protection or documentation, establishing clear right to independent movement across international boundaries, without approval from purported husband, whose actual legal relationship remained deliberately undefined, in ways maximizing control while minimizing responsibility, despite elaborate ceremonial presentation, creating appearance of legitimate marriage. The surveillance detection methods that Lauren and Amira developed demonstrated remarkable creativity in identifying monitoring system limitations, despite comprehensive coverage designed specifically to prevent unauthorized activities or communication. Their systematic approach included testing electronic monitoring through staged conversations, evaluating which topics triggered staff intervention, mapping camera positions by tracking subtle staff behavior changes, indicating observation, awareness, identifying listening device locations through electronic interference patterns, detected using repurposed entertainment system components, and cataloging staff rotation schedules, revealing predictable gaps, providing limited windows for unmonitored conversation or movement within otherwise comprehensively controlled environment. This methodical approach gradually revealed security system architecture designed with primary emphasis on preventing external communication or unauthorized departure, while containing secondary focus on preventing internal alliance. A formation between compound residents intended to remain isolated from one another despite physical proximity within structured environment, specifically designed to maintain separation while preserving illusion of exclusive relationship for each woman. The external communication opportunity that ultimately enabled intervention planning came through identification of staff member whose personal circumstances created potential for assistance beyond established loyalty structure, maintained through exceptional compensation. Yasmin, Bangladeshi housekeeping staff, assigned to Lauren's villa section, had family medical situation, creating financial vulnerability that differentiated her interests from overall household security infrastructure based on established operational protocols. The careful relationship development process included gradual conversation building, creating personal connection, thoughtful assistance with work responsibilities, establishing reciprocal dynamic and eventually direct appeal based on humanitarian considerations rather than financial inducement that might have triggered security protocols specifically designed to identify potential bribery attempts. This careful approach eventually created limited secure communication channel through Yasmin's personal mobile phone during off-compound family visits, enabling critical connection with outside resources necessary for developing extraction strategy, addressing comprehensive physical security, legal complications, and potential diplomatic dimensions requiring coordinated response beyond individual escape capability given multi-layered obstacles deliberately established to prevent precisely such independent departure. The involvement of Detective Layla Hassan represented unexpected alliance, extending beyond traditional law enforcement response, with her personal commitment to addressing exploitation situations, complementing professional expertise in navigating complex legal landscape, where official response remained constrained by political considerations, jurisdictional limitations, and cultural complexities, creating barriers to straightforward intervention. Her unofficial guidance provided crucial framework for evidence, documentation, establishing communication protocols, minimizing security breach risk, identifying potential legal approaches, addressing immigration status complications, and developing relationship with sympathetic consular officials who could provide emergency travel documentation despite passport absence if extraction opportunity materialized. This multidimensional support addressed critical verification challenges extending beyond physical departure to include establishing legal standing necessary for cross-border movement without documentation confiscated upon arrival and never returned, despite multiple requests characterized as security procedures necessary for household residents, but actually serving as fundamental mobility restriction mechanism, preventing independent travel without explicit approval. Designed to maintain control within luxurious environment that functioned as gilded detention facility, despite surface appearance as privileged residence. The extraction planning process required addressing multi-layered security challenges, spanning physical control systems, legal vulnerabilities, and potential diplomatic complications given Sheikh Khalid's prominent position within UAE business community and political connections, creating protection beyond ordinary wealth advantages. The comprehensive approach developed through collaboration between Detective Hassan working unofficially, private security consultant Michael Devlin contracted by Evelyn Carter following communication resumption, and sympathetic consular official James Wilson, who became involved after receiving coded communication through intermediary connection established via Yasmin's external communication channel. Their integrated strategy addressed immediate extraction logistics, documentation necessary for international travel without original passport, legal protection regarding ambiguous immigration status, and potential diplomatic dimensions, requiring careful management to prevent escalation beyond individual case into broader international incident, given prominent individuals involved and potential regional sensitivity regarding public exposure of arrangements maintained behind private compound walls, but contradicting carefully maintained public image, cultivated through strategic philanthropy and business relationships spanning Western and Middle Eastern contexts. The evidence documentation assembled through Lauren and Amira's methodical collection created foundation for legal intervention possibility, though jurisdictional complexities created significant uncertainty regarding which authorities held appropriate standing given ambiguous legal status of compound arrangements. The material accumulated included audio recordings documenting movement restrictions and explicit threats regarding departure attempts, photographic evidence of passport confiscation, mapped security systems demonstrating physical confinement beyond ordinary residential protection, staff instructions explicitly preventing unaccompanied movement outside compound boundaries, and communication records showing systematic monitoring and interference with external contact, including family relationships, intentionally attenuated through gradually increasing isolation mechanisms introduced incrementally to normalize control, while preventing clear recognition of comprehensive restriction patterns until dependency was firmly established through multiple reinforcing systems spanning physical, financial, legal, and psychological dimensions deliberately integrated to prevent straightforward departure once actual circumstances became apparent. Beneath surface, luxury initially interpreted as privilege rather than containment mechanism. The critical timing factors affecting extraction attempt included identifying security rotation, creating optimal opportunity, ensuring documentation preparation without alerting monitoring systems, establishing extraction team positioning without detectable pattern recognition, and most crucially, managing Sheikh Khalid's travel schedule to utilize 3-day business trip to Saudi Arabia, creating leadership gap in household security oversight, despite established protocols continuing routine operation. This narrow window provided essential opportunity requiring extensive advanced preparation coordinated through limited communication channels while maintaining operational security, preventing premature discovery that would likely trigger increased restrictions, potentially eliminating future departure possibility, given pattern observed with previous escape attempts by other household residents that Amira had documented through carefully preserved information collected during her longer residence and shared during clandestine conversations that provided crucial historical context regarding security response protocols and pattern adaptations following previous control breaches. The psychological preparation represented equally important component beyond logistical planning, with Lauren requiring significant emotional reinforcement to overcome comprehensive dependency established through isolation, uncertainty about legal standing, legitimate concerns regarding potential consequences of unsuccessful departure attempt, and powerful psychological manipulation, creating emotional attachment despite recognition of controlling behaviors through mechanisms similar to trauma bonding observed in other captivity situations, despite surface differences in environment quality that created cognitive dissonance between intellectual recognition of confinement, reality, and emotional response to apparent luxury and selective positive reinforcement, carefully calibrated to maintain psychological control alongside physical restrictions. This preparation included realistic discussion of potential outcomes, detailed explanation of support resources available following extraction, clear commitment regarding continued assistance, navigating complex aftermath, including potential legal challenges, and explicit acknowledgement of emotional difficulties frequently experienced during transition from controlled environment, despite objectively undesirable circumstances that nevertheless had become normalized through extended exposure. Deliberate manipulation, specifically designed to create psychological dependency, complementing physical restriction mechanisms. The actual extraction execution represented masterpiece of coordination between internal and external resources, beginning with carefully timed departure, coinciding with security shift change during pre-dawn hours, when surveillance maintained reduced staffing patterns. The exit pathway utilized service corridor, identified during months of careful mapping, with timing synchronized to maintenance activity, creating legitimate explanation for access panel removal, providing alternate route beyond primary security checkpoints. External team positioning established multiple contingency response capabilities without creating detectable pattern that might trigger security protocol adjustments, with resources strategically placed along potential exit routes while maintaining sufficient dispersion, preventing identification as coordinated operation. The documentation necessary for subsequent travel had been prepared through consular channels establishing emergency replacement process, addressing passport absence, with extraction team, including consular representative, with mobile capabilities for immediate travel documentation provision once physical extraction was completed, but before international departure could be arranged through non-standard channels avoiding normal airport procedures, where Sheikh Khalid maintained significant influence through business relationships and political connections that might otherwise prevent departure despite American citizenship, establishing theoretical protection insufficiently reliable given complex regional dynamics and significant resources available to prevent departure once extraction attempt was discovered. The immediate aftermath management following successful physical extraction addressed critical vulnerability period before international departure could be arranged, with safe location establishment outside Dubai, providing temporary security, while documentation, processing, and travel arrangements proceeded through channels specifically selected to minimize detection possibility. The psychological support during this transition period addressed immediate trauma response, significant disorientation following sudden environment change after extended controlled circumstances, and complex emotional reactions, including unexpected loss feelings despite objectively improved situation. Typical response pattern observed in similar extraction cases where environment, normalization, and relationship complexity create attachment despite adverse circumstances that objective analysis would identify as clearly undesirable, but subjective experience includes significant ambivalence resulting from sophisticated manipulation and controlled positive reinforcement specifically designed to create psychological dependency resistant to straightforward logical evaluation. This transition support represented crucial component, preventing potential return, resulting from overwhelming adjustment challenges documented in similar cases where initial extraction succeeded, but subsequent psychological factors led to voluntary return to controlling relationship, despite intellectual recognition of harmful dynamics due to emotional attachment and uncertainty management, difficulties following dramatic circumstance changes requiring comprehensive adjustment across practical, legal, emotional, and psychological dimensions simultaneously. The international departure arrangements required exceptional creativity, given significant resources potentially deployed to prevent Lauren leaving UAE jurisdiction once extraction was discovered, with traditional travel methods presenting vulnerability through monitoring systems, business relationships, and political connections potentially enabling departure prevention, despite documentation establishing legal travel rights. The solution utilized private aviation resources, arranged through business connections entirely separate from typical executive transportation networks, where Sheikh Khalid maintained extensive relationships, with routing specifically designed to establish multiple jurisdiction transitions, creating layered protection against straightforward intervention. The departure timing utilized narrow window between extraction discovery and response mobilization, with journey commencement occurring approximately 14 hours following compound departure, period when initial search focused on local possibilities before expanding to international departure prevention through border control. Notification that extraction team anticipated would follow once internal search proved unsuccessful and security review identified unauthorized departure rather than internal compound location change that initial response protocols typically addressed through established search patterns designed for previous incidents, where residents had attempted relocation within compound boundaries, seeking alternative circumstances but lacking external assistance necessary for complete extraction beyond security perimeter, representing far more significant breach than typical internal boundary crossing between segregated compound sections. The legal complexity continued beyond physical extraction, with Lauren facing potential challenges regarding ceremonial marriage dissolution, financial entanglement resolution, and possible legal claims despite relationship lacking clearly established legal foundation through proper registration procedures. The international dimensions created additional complications, spanning multiple jurisdictions with different approaches to relationship definition, property rights determination, and legal responsibility allocation, creating situation requiring specialized legal expertise, addressing cross-border complexity beyond standard divorce proceedings. The documentation assembled during confinement provided crucial evidence supporting Lauren's position regarding relationship circumstances, though jurisdictional questions remained regarding which legal framework held appropriate authority given ceremonial events in UAE, American citizenship on one side, and property spanning multiple international locations, creating assets subject to different legal systems with varying approaches to relationship dissolution and financial responsibility determination after arrangements characterized as marriage, according to certain traditions, but lacking formal registration, establishing clear legal standing recognized across different national legal frameworks with inconsistent approaches to relationship definition and associated rights determination. The international media explosion following Lauren's return to the United States created unforeseen complications, alongside important awareness raising regarding situations previously hidden behind wealth barriers and private compound walls. The journalistic coverage demonstrated troubling patterns similar to relationship dynamics themselves, with sensational elements frequently emphasized over substantive examination of structural factors creating vulnerability, legal complications enabling control despite theoretical protections citizenship should provide, and psychological manipulation techniques, transcending ordinary relationship dynamics through deliberate application of control methodologies refined across multiple similar situations. The extensive coverage focused disproportionately on luxury elements, creating misleading impression about fundamental experience despite surface opulence, with headline emphasis frequently highlighting wealth aspects rather than core control dynamics that defined actual lived experience, despite material surroundings vastly exceeding ordinary comfort standards, but ultimately serving as gilded cage rather than privileged lifestyle, when fundamental autonomy remained absent, despite apparent advantages that superficial analysis frequently mischaracterized as undermining legitimate victimization claims, despite clear evidence regarding movement restrictions, communication monitoring, documentation, confiscation, and explicit threats, establishing clear confinement reality regardless of environment quality, that created cognitive dissonance for outside observers, lacking direct experience with control dynamics that transcend material circumstances. The legal response from Sheikh Khalid's extensive representation team demonstrated sophisticated approach to reputation management rather than substantive engagement with documented evidence, combining categorical denial, jurisdictional challenges regarding appropriate legal forum, procedural objections to evidence obtained through unauthorized recording within private residence, and carefully constructed counter-narrative, suggesting relationship misunderstanding rather than deliberate control system, established through multiple reinforcing mechanisms, spanning physical security, financial dependency, documentation, confiscation, and psychological manipulation. The strategic approach demonstrated clear understanding regarding public perception management, focusing communication on procedural questions rather than substantive evidence evaluation, while simultaneously developing parallel reputation rehabilitation campaign through strategic philanthropy, carefully staged public appearances with business partners, establishing apparent normal continuation despite serious allegations, and selective media engagement through sympathetic outlets, providing platform for alternative narrative presentation without rigorous questioning regarding documented evidence contradicting presented characterization of relationship, circumstances, and household arrangements that substantial evidence established functioned as controlled environment for multiple women maintained through similar patterns despite surface customization based on individual background and personal characteristics. The psychological healing process represented perhaps the most challenging aspect of Lauren's post-extraction experience, with complex trauma response requiring specialized therapeutic intervention, addressing both acute symptoms and fundamental worldview recalibration necessary, following extended exposure to manipulative environment deliberately designed to normalize control while presenting circumstances as privileged opportunity rather than exploitation, despite clear evidence regarding autonomy, limitations that objective analysis easily identified as inappropriate restriction but subjective experience had partially accepted through gradual normalization and comparative reference points deliberately established through selective information provision, creating distorted understanding regarding appropriate relationship, expectations, and personal rights, transcending cultural differences or wealth disparities that had been strategically emphasized to justify control mechanisms presented as cultural accommodation or security requirement rather than fundamental autonomy violation, serving control maintenance rather than legitimate protection. Despite security justification, superficially plausible, given wealth level, but ultimately functioning primarily as movement restriction, rather than genuine safety measure proportionate to legitimate concerns. The supportive community that developed following Lauren's return created essential foundation for recovery process, with carefully constructed network, including both personal connections reestablished after systematic isolation and professional resources specifically experienced with similar situations, providing critical reference points, normalizing her responses while validating experience authenticity, despite external questions sometimes emerging from luxury elements, creating cognitive dissonance for observers, lacking direct understanding regarding control dynamics that transcend immaterial circumstances. This support structure provided crucial validation, countering both external skepticism and internal doubt, deliberately cultivated through gaslighting techniques employed during confinement, with consistent reinforcement helping reconstruct accurate understanding regarding normal relationship boundaries, appropriate autonomy expectations, and legitimate movement freedom, regardless of partnership status or cultural context, despite deliberate confusion created through selective tradition, emphasis justifying control presented as cultural accommodation rather than universal rights violation transcending specific background or geographical location, despite strategic use of cultural differences to justify restrictions, lacking legitimate foundation in actual traditional practices accurately understood beyond superficial characterization, serving control justification rather than authentic cultural expression. The documentary evidence that Lauren had methodically collected provided foundation for both legal proceedings and public understanding, with recorded conversations, mapped security systems, documented communication restrictions, and staff directive evidence establishing clear confinement reality beyond reasonable dispute, despite luxury environment, creating superficial impression at odds with fundamental experience, defined primarily through autonomy limitation rather than material circumstance. This comprehensive documentation addressed critical verification challenges frequently undermining similar situations, lacking concrete evidence, with Lauren's methodical approach, despite difficult circumstances, creating unusually robust record, establishing pattern details, specific restriction mechanisms, explicit threat documentation, and systematic isolation implementation that collectively contradicted alternative narrative attempts, suggesting misunderstanding, rather than deliberate control system refined through previous application across multiple similar relationships following identical patterns, despite superficial customization based on individual background characteristics and personal interests identified during selection phase and subsequently incorporated into relationship presentation, creating impression of unique connection despite systematic methodology application following established template with minor modifications rather than representing authentic partnership individually developed through mutual discovery and genuine emotional connection, despite sophisticated simulation, creating powerful illusion throughout courtship phase before revealing actual circumstances, following commitment, establishment, and physical relocation, creating practical dependency, fundamentally altering power dynamics. Once original environment connections had been systematically attenuated through deliberate isolation mechanisms. The legal proceedings that eventually addressed relationship dissolution, financial entanglement resolution, and potential criminal aspects faced significant jurisdictional complications, spanning multiple legal systems with different approaches to relationship definition, personal autonomy standards, and appropriate remedy determination. The international dimensions created procedural challenges, requiring specialized expertise, navigating cross-border complexity, transcending standard legal representation capabilities, with team, including specialists in international family law, cross-jurisdictional asset tracing, immigration implications, and potential criminal dimensions requiring comprehensive approach, addressing interrelated aspects, spanning multiple legal frameworks, with inconsistent approaches to fundamental questions regarding relationship categorization, appropriate authority, determination, and remedy availability given ceremonial marriage, lacking formal registration, creating ambiguous legal standing, further complicated by jurisdictional questions regarding which system held appropriate authority, given events spanning multiple countries with different legal traditions and varying approaches to relationship classification and associated rights determination, requiring careful navigation to establish appropriate forum while preventing procedural dismissal. Through jurisdictional technicalities, despite clear substantive concerns regarding documented control mechanisms requiring legal response, regardless of relationship, classification questions, potentially complicating straightforward resolution through established domestic frameworks, insufficiently designed for cross-border complexity, characterizing multinational relationship dissolution, where fundamental agreement regarding appropriate governing law remains contested, despite clear evidence regarding autonomy violations, transcending specific legal classification questions, despite their procedural importance, determining available remedies and appropriate forum for resolution seeking beyond technical categorization to address fundamental rights violations documented through comprehensive evidence collection. The awareness campaign that developed from Lauren's experience represented perhaps the most meaningful legacy beyond individual circumstances, with carefully constructed educational resources addressing warning signs, vulnerability factors, and protective strategies for women navigating relationships, spanning significant wealth disparities, cultural differences, or international dimensions, creating potential for similar dynamics without adequate preparation or support resources. This educational framework emphasized specific risk identification beyond generic caution, providing concrete guidance regarding documentation maintenance, communication preservation, independence protection, and support network maintenance, countering isolation attempts representing early warning signs, frequently preceding more direct control mechanisms, introduced gradually following commitment, establishment, and practical dependency in development. The resources particularly addressed sophisticated manipulation techniques utilizing cultural differences, legal complexities, or wealth capabilities, creating specialized vulnerability factors requiring specific awareness beyond general relationship guidance, insufficient for navigating specialized circumstances where traditional support resources may lack specific experience necessary for recognizing particular warning signs associated with relationships involving significant power differentials, cross-cultural dimensions, or international movement, creating jurisdictional complexity, potentially limiting straightforward protection availability despite theoretical safeguards citizenship status should provide, but practical experience demonstrates frequently prove insufficient without specific preparation and deliberate protective measure implementation throughout relationship development, rather than attempting remedy implementation following control establishment when intervention faces significantly greater challenges, despite clear rights violations established through objective analysis, contradicting subjective normalization, sometimes developing through extended exposure to manipulative environment, specifically designed to confuse appropriate boundary recognition, despite clear standards applicable across cultural contexts beyond selective traditional emphasis, strategically employed to justify inappropriate restrictions, serving control maintenance rather than legitimate cultural expression, accurately understood within appropriate contextual framework beyond superficial characterization. The long-term psychological impact of Lauren's experience created complex recovery challenges extending far beyond initial extraction, with trauma response patterns requiring specialized therapeutic intervention, addressing both acute symptoms and fundamental worldview recalibration, necessary following extended exposure to environment deliberately designed to normalize control while presenting circumstances as privileged opportunity. The therapeutic approach specifically developed for her situation incorporated elements addressing Stockholm Syndrome manifestations, despite luxury context, creating unusual presentation compared to typical captivity situations, identity reconstruction, following immersion in environment where self-concept became primarily defined through relationship with controlling figure, and recalibration of normal boundary recognition, frequently compromised through extended exposure to manipulative dynamics, presented as cultural differences rather than universal rights violations, transcending specific traditions, or geographical context, despite strategic emphasis on selected cultural elements, serving control justification rather than reflecting authentic traditional practices accurately understood beyond superficial characterization. The judicial resolution ultimately achieved through international legal proceedings established important precedents regarding cross-border relationship dynamics, with particular significance addressing jurisdictional questions that frequently create barriers to straightforward resolution in cases spanning multiple legal systems, with differing approaches to relationship classification, appropriate remedy, determination, and fundamental rights protection beyond specific legal categorization questions. The judgment specifically addressed ceremonial marriage, lacking formal registration, establishing clear determination regarding property rights, financial responsibility, and legal status dissolution, despite deliberate ambiguity created through documentation designed to maximize control while minimizing accountability through strategic exploitation of legal gray areas spanning multiple jurisdictions. This resolution created important reference point for similar situations, establishing procedural pathway, navigating complex terrain, frequently enabling powerful individuals to avoid responsibility through jurisdictional complexity, despite clear evidence regarding inappropriate control mechanisms documented through comprehensive evidence collection, establishing pattern beyond reasonable dispute, regardless of specific relationship, classification, questions that technical legal analysis might emphasize, but substantive rights consideration transcends when addressing fundamental autonomy violations clearly established through objective evidence, despite luxurious context, creating superficial impression, potentially obscuring underlying control, reality, defining actual lived experience despite material surroundings, vastly exceeding ordinary comfort standards. The financial settlement reflecting court determination established appropriate remedy, addressing both tangible asset division and compensation for documented control mechanisms, with judgment specifically rejecting defense arguments regarding cultural context or relationship, misunderstanding given overwhelming evidence, establishing deliberate system application rather than miscommunication or cultural difference. Legitimately understood. The settlement structure specifically addressed international complexity through carefully designed enforcement mechanisms spanning multiple jurisdictions where assets existed, creating comprehensive approach, preventing avoidance through strategic relocation or legal maneuvering across different systems with varying approaches to judgment, recognition, or enforcement procedures. This resolution established important precedent regarding accountability, extending beyond jurisdictional boundaries that wealthy individuals frequently exploit to avoid responsibility, creating meaningful consequences, despite resources typically enabling effective insulation from straightforward accountability through sophisticated legal representation, strategic asset positioning, and jurisdictional complexity navigation, beyond capabilities available to individuals lacking similar resource access or specialized knowledge regarding international legal system navigation. The diplomatic dimensions surrounding case resolution required careful management, given potential sensitivity regarding public discussion about practices occurring within private compound walls, but contradicting carefully maintained international reputation cultivated through strategic business relationships and philanthropic initiatives, establishing public image substantially disconnected from private behavior patterns, documented through Lauren's methodical evidence collection. The resolution approach specifically developed through consultation between legal representatives, diplomatic officials, and security experts created framework addressing individual justice considerations while minimizing potential for unnecessary escalation beyond specific circumstances into broader international tension that might otherwise have developed without thoughtful management, considering both legitimate accountability requirements and wider relationship implications between countries with different approaches to individual autonomy, relationship definition, and appropriate privacy boundaries regarding matters traditionally considered family affairs, despite clear evidence, establishing control mechanisms, transcending ordinary domestic arrangement through systematic application of restriction, methodologies contrary to universal rights standards, transcending specific cultural context despite strategic emphasis on selected traditional elements serving justification purposes rather than reflecting authentic cultural practices. Accurately understood beyond superficial characterization, employed primarily to rationalize control rather than honor genuine tradition. The security considerations remained relevant long after physical extraction, with protective measures necessary following Lauren's public statements, given resources potentially available for retaliation against perceived reputation damage or financial consequences resulting from legal proceedings establishing precedent potentially affecting similar arrangements maintained through comparable methodologies. The comprehensive security assessment specifically addressed both physical protection requirements and digital vulnerability considerations, given technological capabilities potentially deployed against individuals perceived as threatening established interests or public image, carefully maintained through strategic relationship management and media engagement. This ongoing security dimension represented important reality frequently overlooked in similar situations, where initial extraction receives primary attention, while subsequent protection requirements receive insufficient consideration. Despite potential for sophisticated response capabilities extending far beyond ordinary relationship dissolution circumstances, given resource asymmetry, creating unusual vulnerability, requiring specialized protective measures, addressing unique threat profile, substantially different from typical domestic separation scenarios, lacking similar resource differential or international dimensions, creating jurisdictional complexity, potentially limiting straightforward protection. Mechanism application despite clear risk factors established through pattern recognition and specific threat assessment, identifying potential vulnerability requiring ongoing mitigation strategies beyond initial extraction phase. Traditionally receiving primary focus despite representing merely initial step in comprehensive safety establishment requiring sustained attention throughout extended timeline. The media response evolution, following initial sensationalized coverage, gradually developed more substantive examination as educational efforts provided greater context regarding control dynamics, transcending luxury elements initially, receiving disproportionate emphasis, creating misleading impression about fundamental experience despite surface opulence. This coverage maturation process reflected increasing understanding regarding psychological manipulation, sophistication, legal complexity, enabling control despite theoretical protection citizenship should provide, and universal rights application, transcending cultural differences, frequently mischaracterized to justify inappropriate restrictions, serving control maintenance rather than reflecting legitimate traditional practices accurately understood. Beyond superficial characterization, the more thoughtful analysis eventually emerging addressed structural vulnerability factors, enabling similar situations despite theoretical safeguards, jurisdictional complexity, creating practical protection limitations despite clear standards establishing universal rights beyond specific cultural context, and psychological dynamics, creating dependency despite objectively undesirable circumstances through sophisticated manipulation specifically designed to normalize control while presenting relationship as unique opportunity rather than exploitation, despite clear evidence regarding autonomy limitations, objectively identified as inappropriate restriction, transcending material circumstance, quality sometimes creating cognitive dissonance among observers, lacking direct understanding regarding control dynamics, operating independently from environment, luxury, potentially obscuring fundamental experience, defined primarily through autonomy, limitation, rather than material provision regardless of quality. The educational legacy that emerged from Lauren Hayes' experience extended far beyond her individual circumstances to create lasting impact through carefully developed resources addressing warning signs, vulnerability factors, and protective strategies for women navigating relationships involving significant wealth differentials, cross-cultural elements, or international dimensions, creating specialized risk factors requiring specific awareness beyond general relationship guidance. The comprehensive framework established through collaboration between Lauren, specialized therapists with relevant experience, legal experts addressing jurisdictional complexity, and security professionals understanding unique vulnerability patterns created practical resources addressing concrete protection strategies rather than general cautions, insufficient for navigating sophisticated manipulation techniques, utilizing cultural differences, legal complexities, or wealth capabilities, creating specialized vulnerability, requiring specific countermeasures beyond standard relationship advice, lacking targeted relevance for particular circumstances where traditional support resources may provide inadequate protection, without specialized knowledge regarding specific warning signs associated with controlling relationships involving significant power differentials, cross-cultural elements, or international movement, creating jurisdictional complexity, potentially limiting straightforward intervention, despite theoretical protections citizenship status should provide. The recovery journey that Lauren shared through carefully considered public education efforts provided powerful framework, helping others recognize warning signs she had initially missed, despite general relationship awareness insufficient, for identifying specialized manipulation techniques refined through multiple applications across similar situations. Her testimony particularly emphasized early indicators preceding more explicit control mechanisms, including subtle communication monitoring, presented as security concern, gradual isolation from existing support networks characterized as cultural transition requirement, strategic dependency establishment through seemingly generous provisions, creating financial control beneath superficial abundance, and gradual normalization of movement restrictions introduced incrementally with plausible justifications before revealing comprehensive confinement reality once practical dependency had been firmly established through multiple reinforcing systems spanning physical security, financial arrangements, documentation, confiscation, and psychological manipulation deliberately integrated to prevent straightforward departure once actual circumstances became apparent beneath surface luxury, initially interpreted as privilege rather than containment mechanism, despite fundamental autonomy limitations defining actual experience, regardless of material surroundings, vastly exceeding ordinary comfort standards, but ultimately serving as gilded cage rather than privileged lifestyle when essential freedom remained absent despite apparent advantages. The advocacy organization that developed from initial awareness efforts eventually established comprehensive support system, addressing both prevention through educational resources and intervention capabilities, supporting individuals trapped in similar circumstances regardless of geographical location, cultural context, or resource limitations, creating barriers to assistance access. The international framework specifically addressed jurisdictional complexity, frequently enabling controlling individuals to maintain exploitative arrangements through strategic use of legal barriers, cross-border complications, and resource advantages, creating practical intervention limitations despite clear rights violations established through objective analysis. This organization's development represented perhaps most meaningful legacy beyond Lauren's individual circumstances, creating sustainable structure, providing both immediate practical assistance for extraction planning and longer-term support, addressing complex recovery needs, following successful physical separation, but preceding comprehensive healing requiring extended support, addressing psychological, legal, financial, and security dimensions beyond initial emergency intervention, frequently receiving primary focus, despite representing merely first step in comprehensive recovery process, requiring sustained assistance throughout extended timeline, addressing multidimensional needs, evolving throughout recovery journey rather than concluding with physical extraction despite its critical importance as essential foundation for subsequent healing impossible, while physical confinement continues, but insufficient alone for comprehensive recovery, requiring multi-layered support, addressing diverse needs, spanning practical, legal, emotional, and psychological dimensions simultaneously. The relationship between Lauren and Amira evolved from situational alliance, necessitated by mutual confinement, into enduring friendship, representing rare positive outcome, emerging from fundamentally negative circumstances, with their continued connection, providing mutual support throughout complex recovery process, while establishing collaboration foundation, addressing broader issues extending beyond individual experiences to include systematic advocacy, addressing structural factors, enabling similar situations despite theoretical protections legal frameworks should provide. But practical experience demonstrates frequently prove insufficient without specific knowledge regarding vulnerability recognition and protective measure implementation. Their partnership particularly focused on educational initiatives, helping others recognize warning signs they had initially missed, despite general relationship awareness insufficient for identifying specialized manipulation techniques, refined through multiple applications across similar situations, following established patterns, despite superficial customization based on individual background characteristics and personal interests, incorporated into relationship presentation, creating impression of unique connection despite systematic methodology application following consistent template with minor modifications, rather than representing authentic partnership individually developed through mutual discovery and genuine emotional connection, despite sophisticated simulation, creating powerful illusion throughout courtship phase, before revealing actual circumstances following commitment, establishment, and physical relocation, creating practical dependency, fundamentally altering power dynamics. Once original environment connections had been systematically attenuated through deliberate isolation mechanisms. The international standards development that emerged from advocacy efforts established important frameworks addressing cross-border protection requirements, appropriate response protocols spanning jurisdictional boundaries, and recognition systems establishing clear understanding regarding universal rights application, transcending specific cultural context. Despite strategic emphasis on selected traditional elements, frequently mischaracterized to justify inappropriate restrictions, serving control maintenance, rather than reflecting authentic cultural practices, accurately understood beyond superficial characterization. These standards particularly address jurisdictional complexity, creating practical protection limitations, despite theoretical safeguards citizenship status should provide, establishing clear guidelines regarding appropriate intervention, regardless of geographical location, cultural context, or legal system variations, creating barriers to straightforward assistance, despite clear rights violations established through objective analysis, transcending specific relationship classification questions that technical legal perspectives might emphasize, but fundamental human rights considerations supersede when addressing basic autonomy protection, representing universal standard beyond specific cultural tradition or geographical context, despite strategic use of selective cultural elements serving justification purposes, rather than reflecting legitimate practices accurately understood within appropriate contextual framework beyond superficial characterization, employed primarily to rationalize control rather than honor genuine tradition. The personal transformation that Lauren Hayes experienced throughout recovery process extended far beyond initial extraction, to include fundamental identity, reconstruction, worldview recalibration, and ultimately meaningful purpose development through transforming traumatic experience into educational resource, potentially preventing similar situations for others who might otherwise face comparable vulnerability without specific awareness regarding warning signs she had initially failed to recognize, despite general relationship knowledge insufficient for identifying specialized manipulation techniques refined through multiple applications across similar situations. Her journey from fashion industry professional to educational advocate represented profound evolution, reflecting both personal healing process and meaningful contribution development, addressing structural factors enabling similar situations despite theoretical protections legal frameworks should provide, but practical experience demonstrates frequently prove insufficient without specific knowledge regarding vulnerability recognition and protective measure implementation before control systems become fully established through multiple reinforcing mechanisms spanning physical security, financial dependency, documentation, confiscation, and psychological manipulation deliberately integrated to prevent straightforward departure. Once actual circumstances become apparent beneath surface, luxury initially interpreted as privilege rather than containment mechanism designed specifically to maintain control, while presenting circumstances as unique opportunity, despite fundamental autonomy limitations defining actual experience regardless of material surroundings. The documentary film Palace Walls, Lauren Hayes' story, premiered 5 years after her extraction, presenting balanced examination of both case specifics and broader issues, affecting vulnerable individuals, navigating relationships, involving significant wealth differentials, cross-cultural elements, or international dimensions, creating specialized risk factors requiring specific awareness beyond general relationship guidance. The film, developed with Lauren's direct participation, ensuring both factual accuracy and appropriate sensitivity regarding complex emotional dimensions, became valuable educational resource used by universities, women's organizations, and international safety programs to illustrate how sophisticated control mechanisms can operate beneath surface luxury, creating misleading impressions about fundamental experience, despite clear evidence regarding autonomy limitations. Objectively identified as inappropriate restriction, transcending material circumstance, quality sometimes, creating cognitive dissonance among observers, lacking direct understanding regarding control dynamics, operating independently from Environment, luxury, potentially obscuring fundamental experience defined primarily through autonomy, limitation, rather than material provision regardless of quality. This thoughtful treatment helped transform Lauren's story from sensationalized luxury narrative into nuanced examination of universal control patterns, requiring specific recognition capabilities beyond general relationship awareness. Insufficient for identifying specialized manipulation techniques refined through multiple applications across similar situations, following established patterns despite superficial customization based on individual background, characteristics, and personal interests incorporated into relationship presentation, creating impression of unique connection despite systematic methodology. Application representing fundamental rights violation regardless of specific cultural context or material provision quality, ultimately serving as control mechanism rather than genuine care, despite sophisticated presentation, creating powerful illusion throughout courtship phase before revealing actual circumstances. Following commitment, establishment, fundamentally altering, power dynamics once, practical dependency creates significant barriers to straightforward separation, despite clear recognition regarding inappropriate restriction, transcending specific relationship classification or environmental quality considerations representing secondary factors compared to fundamental autonomy limitations, defining actual lived experience, regardless of superficial appearance sometimes, creating misleading impressions among outside observers, lacking direct understanding regarding sophisticated control dynamics, operating beneath surface luxury, potentially obscuring fundamental rights violations, requiring specific awareness, beyond general relationship guidance, insufficient for navigating complex situations, deliberately designed to normalize control while presenting circumstances as unique opportunity, despite clear evidence regarding inappropriate restrictions establishing fundamental rights violations, transcending specific cultural context or material provision quality.